Okay, so the sutta begins when the Buddha is living at Savatthi in the Eastern Park. This was the building that was established for the Sangha by Visakha, the lay devotee Visakha, who is called Migara's mother. And so it seems to, again, to highlight the importance of the sutta. It said that the Buddha was living there together with many of the most eminent of the elder disciples, the Venerable Sariputta, Mahamoggallana, Mahakassapa, Mahakachana, Mahakotita, Mahakappina, the Venerable Mahachunda, the Venerable Anuruddha, the Venerable Revata, the Venerable Ananda, and other very well-known elder disciples. And if you don't know who Sariputta, Moggallana, Kachana, Kotita, Kappina, Anuruddha, Revata, all of them we have on the Bodhi path where there's the big stone statues, all of them are represented along that stone path. Okay, so it says that at this time that the elder monks had been teaching and instructing the younger monks, instructing 10 younger monks, 20, 30, 40, and then those younger monks, after receiving the instruction, achieved successive stages of high distinction. This is a kind of idiom that occurs in the suttas, which is a kind of general term which indicates that the monks who are practicing achieve various stages of spiritual attainment and realization. It could be they're achieving the first jhana, second jhana, third jhana, fourth jhana, or they could have achieved the formless meditations. They could have achieved different stages of insight knowledge, or achieved any of the fruits of the path. Okay, so now it's saying, to specify the occasion, it says that it's the Uposatha day of the 15th on the full moon night of the Pavarana ceremony. The Buddha was sitting out in the open, surrounded by the Sangha of bhikkhus. Okay, what is this Uposatha day of the 15th on the night of the Pavarana ceremony? Now in India there's a period which is known as it's the monsoon period, 3 months when the rains come down very heavily. So this period becomes a special time of observance for all of the religious, ascetic and spiritual communities in India during the Buddha's time, perhaps right up to the present. Because when it's raining heavily, then it's difficult to travel around. So it becomes the established practice amongst the ascetic communities, for the ascetics, the monks, the sadhus, to spend that 3-month period during the heavy rains in a retreat. This is called the Vasa, or Vasavasa, the 3 months of the rains retreat. Usually this will take place, according to the Buddhist determination, it takes place starting from the day after the full moon day of the month of July up to the full moon day of the month of October. And during those 3 months, the monks are not supposed to travel, but to remain fixed in their regular residence. So if there's some special reason, they're allowed to travel, to go outside up to 7 days, but they have to be back at their regular residence on the 7th day. Okay, then the rains residence comes to an end on the full moon day, which will be the 15th according to the lunar fortnight. In the lunar fortnight, one counts usually one fortnight of 15 days. Most of the time, the other fortnight has 15 days, but in order to make the year balance out, some of them have 14 days. So you get months of 30 days, months of 29 days. Then on the last day of the rains retreat, which is the 15th, the full moon night, all of the monks come together in a ceremony which is called the Pavarana ceremony. In this ceremony, because the monks have been living together in close quarters, they might have done something wrong, and so each monk, going down in order of seniority, invites or requests the other monks to point out to him any faults that he might have committed that he didn't perceive on his own. Then usually when that Pavarana ceremony is finished, then the monks are free to begin traveling again. Okay, so this is the 15th day of that lunar fortnight. It's the last day of the rains retreat. So normally this would be the time when the monks are coming together all for the last occasion before they scatter and go wandering in the four directions. And so the Buddha is sitting there and he's silently looking over the community of monks. And then he addresses them and he says that, first he says, I'm content with this progress, but then he encourages them to strive still more vigorously. He says, arouse still more energy to attain the unattained, to achieve the unachieved, to realize the unrealized. In other words, he wants them all to progress further and to make the effort to achieve the final goal, even on that final night of the rains retreat. But then he says, I shall wait here at Savatthi for the Kaumudhi full moon of the 4th month. That is, normally after the 3rd month, the Buddha himself would set out wandering, but he wants to give an opportunity, it seems this is his reason, for the monks to stay put, not to go wandering, and to give the opportunity for monks from the outside who have been spending the rains retreat in other places to come to Savatthi in order to see the Buddha during this last month before the Buddha starts wandering. So the month, this is actually the 4th month of the rainy season, but it's a month when the rains have actually stopped falling. And so it's a very beautiful month in northern India, when the weather is cool and pleasant. Most of the time during the day the skies are clear, and it's the time when the water lilies blossom. The water lily is called Komudu. So this is called the Kaumudhi, the month of Kaumudhi. And then the end of that month is the full moon day, when it's called the Kaumudhi full moon. That's the full moon when the water lilies are blooming and they're illuminated by the light of the full moon, and the weather is clear and cool. At night one can see all of the stars in the sky. Okay, so now scattered over the countryside, the monks who have been living elsewhere have heard that the Buddha is going to be continuing on in Savatthi for another month. And so they all leave, or at least many of them leave their residences, and they come to Savatthi in order to see the Buddha. And during this month, it said, as the weeks go by, the elder monks are teaching even more intensively. They're teaching and instructing the younger monks. And then the younger monks are continuing to strive diligently, and they're reaching still higher stages of attainment. Okay, then when the full moon in the month of Komudi arrives, again the Buddha is sitting out in the open, surrounded by the Sangha of the monks, and he surveys the silent Sangha of monks, and he then addresses them, and he speaks praise of this community. He says, "This assembly is free from prattle, free from chatter. It consists purely of heartwood." Heartwood is the hard and solid wood at the center of a tree. It's the wood that one can use to make furniture. And so he continues to praise this assembly. He says, "This assembly is worthy of gifts, worthy of hospitality, worthy of offerings, worthy of anjali, as reverential salutation, an incomparable field of merit for the world. Then this assembly is such that even a small gift to it becomes great, that is, it generates great merit, and a great gift generates still greater merit. This is an assembly that's rare for the world to see, and it's worth traveling many leagues, even with a travel bag, to see such a community of monks as this." And then he starts specifying the achievement of the monks in this assembly. So he says first that there are starting from the higher and then working down in stages, that in this community of monks, there are monks who have destroyed the asavas, all the defilements, and who have become liberated by final knowledge. That is, that there are arahants in this assembly. There are other monks who have destroyed the 5 lower fetters and who have become non-returners, who will take rebirth in the higher realms and reach final liberation there. Again, in this assembly, there are monks who have destroyed the 3 fetters and who have weakened greed, hatred, and delusion. So these are the once-returners who come back one more time and then reach the end of suffering. And then there are monks who have destroyed the 3 fetters and who have become stream enterers, who have at most 7 more existences before reaching full enlightenment and gaining liberation. Then in the next couple of paragraphs, he speaks about the practices of the monks in that assembly. And first he goes through what are called the 37 aids to enlightenment, which are arranged into the 7 groups: the 4 foundations of mindfulness, the 4 right efforts or right kinds of striving, the 4 bases for spiritual power, the 5 faculties, the 5 powers, the 7 enlightenment factors, the Noble Eightfold Path. Then he comes to the specific meditation subjects that the monks are practicing. He says that in this assembly or in this community there are monks who are practicing, we have the 4 immeasurables, that is the boundless loving kindness, compassion, altruistic joy, equanimity. Then there are monks who are practicing the meditation on foulness, or the unattractive nature of the body. This is the meditation on the 32 parts of the body in order to see the unattractive nature of the body. Then there are monks who are practicing the contemplation of impermanence, observing the rise and fall of the 5 aggregates. And then he says, in this sangha of bhikkhus, there are monks who are devoted to the development of mindfulness of breathing. So in a way, he's sort of gone through the whole register of items till he comes to the item or the subject that he wants to focus upon in this discourse. Okay, so now in section number 15, he actually takes up mindfulness of breathing. And so he says, when mindfulness of breathing is developed and cultivated, it is of great fruit and great benefit. When mindfulness of breathing is developed and cultivated, it fulfills the 4 foundations of mindfulness. When the 4 foundations of mindfulness are developed and cultivated, they fulfill the 7 factors of enlightenment. And when the 7 factors of enlightenment are developed and cultivated, they fulfill true knowledge and deliverance or liberation. So here we could see that the Buddha is taking mindfulness of breathing, and then first of all, he's, in a general way, he's declaring that it's of great fruit and benefit. But then he sketches the benefits. First, this is like a synoptical teaching or a condensed teaching. So he presents the condensed teaching in several steps. So we have the 1 meditation subject, mindfulness of breathing, fulfills all 4 of the foundations of mindfulness. So that is the second step, from mindfulness of breathing itself. Then the second, fulfilling the 4 foundations of mindfulness. Then when the 4 foundations of mindfulness are fulfilled by the practice of mindfulness of breathing, the third step is that they fulfill the 7 bojjhangas, the 7 factors of enlightenment. Then when the 7 factors of enlightenment are developed to fulfillment, then comes the 4th step. They fulfill true knowledge and deliverance, liberation. And so this paragraph sets up a kind of, almost like a table of contents or an outline for the rest of the sutta. And then in what follows, the Buddha is going to fill in that outline by elaborating on each of these expressions. Okay, so first the Buddha is going to explain how mindfulness of breathing is developed and cultivated so that it is of great fruit and great benefit. And first he mentions what would be the ideal places for practicing mindfulness of breathing. That is, one can go to the forest. Here we have forest right around here. And normally, if one goes to the forest, the ideal place within the forest to sit down will be at the foot of a tree. Because if one is sitting at the foot of a tree, then one has, often it's easy to form a seat from the leaves that have fallen, the leaves or the pine needles, if it's a pine tree. And then one has the canopy of leaves to give one shelter from the heat of the sun. Okay, so one goes to either the forest, the foot of a tree, or the empty hut. One sits down, one folds the legs crosswise. It doesn't have to be full lotus, but any comfortable cross-legged position. Keeps the body erect, establishes mindfulness in front of one, and then ever mindful, one breathes in, mindful, one breathes out. In a sense, this is like the whole essence of the practice of mindfulness of breathing is really summed up in that one phrase, ever mindful or just mindful. Satova asasati, sato pasasati. Ever mindful, one breathes in. Mindful, one breathes out. Okay, so the basic practice, and really this is like the foundation for the whole building or construction of mindfulness of breathing, is all contained within that first sentence. Ever mindful, one breathes in. Mindful, one breathes out. Okay, but now the Buddha is going to show how the mindfulness of breathing is developed. And here he goes into what is sometimes called the first tetrad, that is a set of 4 items. So he says, breathing in long, one understands, I breathe in long, or breathing out long, one understands, I breathe out long. Breathing in short, one understands, I breathe in short. Or breathing out short, he understands, I breathe out short. So now, as one is observing the breath with mindfulness, one notices that there's different lengths to the breath. Sometimes the breath is very slow and long. Sometimes it's quicker, more rapid, and so it's short. So in this phase, one makes the mental note of the length of the breath, whether it's long or short. And of course, this is relative, or the two are relative to each other. Different people will have different lengths of their breath. And it's always been a little bit curious to myself why the long breath is put before the short breath. Because in just about everybody's experience, when one first sits down and starts to meditate, the breathing comes more, because the mind is still in a coarse state, the breathing comes more quickly, and so the breath is, correspondingly, the breath is shorter. Then as the mind becomes more quiet and peaceful, then the breath will become longer, more drawn out, and more subtle, till the point is reached sometimes where it seems one isn't breathing at all, but it's actually taking place, but very, very subtly. Okay, and the verb that's used here, this is interesting, that it uses the verb here, pajanati, which is related to the noun panya, which normally means wisdom. So this is not, at this point, pajanati isn't suggesting that this is an act of wisdom, but it's, you could say it's a clear discernment of the length of the breath, whether it's long or short. Okay, so the distinction between the long and short breath, these make up the first 2 items in the first tetrad. Then comes the 3rd item in the tetrad. And with this, there are different interpretations. Okay, it says, he trains thus, I shall breathe in. I'm going to delete here the phrase that comes in brackets. So the actual Pali text says, I shall breathe in experiencing the whole body. He trains thus, I shall breathe out experiencing the whole body. And in Pali,
Yeah, the Pali expression here is sabba kaya patisangvedi. So literally, sabba is all, kaya is body, and patisangvedi means experiencing. Now this is the way the tradition explains this phrase. This is a tradition that comes down in the Visuddhimagga, the commentaries. They say that what's meant by experiencing the whole body is experiencing the whole body of breath, which means experiencing each breath in its totality. That's why the phrase of breath was added here, following the tradition. So the way they explain this is that they say each breath has three phases. There is the beginning phase, which is, for example, with the in-breath, that very moment when one starts to draw the breath in. Then there's the middle phase, which is the entire extension of the breath, drawing the breath in all the ways up, up, up. Then the third phase is the ending of the breath, just as one brings the breath to an end. And similarly with the out-breath, there's the beginning of the out-breath, where one just starts to exhale the air. Then there's the middle phase, which is the full extension of the out-breath. Then there's the end phase, where the out-breath comes to an end. So they say that in this stage of practice, one makes the determination to follow each in-breath and each out-breath through each of its three stages.
Okay, so this is the way the tradition explains it. With each in-breath, one is aware of all three phases, beginning, middle, end. And then with each out-breath, one is aware of beginning, middle, end. And at the time I was working with this, I have to say I actually wanted to leave it without the bracketed phrase. But my teacher of the time, who was sort of supervising me in this translation, giving advice, he said people won't understand this. And so he was, in a way, more follow the commentarial tradition more strictly than I did. So he said, to make it clear for people, you should put in-breath and out-breath in brackets. And I said, I don't want to do that because it's not in the text itself. He said, you'd better do it. So I didn't have a choice. But then when I did the translation of the Sanghayutta Nikaya, by that time he had passed away, so I was free to follow my own inclination. Okay, now if one just takes the words by themselves without following the commentary, it seems to be saying that as one is breathing in and out, one is aware of or experiencing the whole body. And I think what gives further strength to that interpretation is the word patisangvedi. Because the word patisangvedi conveys a stronger meaning than the sense of being aware of. If the objective is to be aware of the entire breath, I think the text would have used the word pajanati. He understands, or he knows that, or he knows the entire body of breath. He knows the entire body of the out-breath. But patisangvedi is used for, a direct sort of maybe hardcore experience, bodily experience. And so what seems to me to be the case is that as one is breathing in and out, It doesn't mean that one shifts the attention away from the breath to the body as a whole, but one is still being aware, keeping the focus point on the in and out breath, wherever one can observe it most clearly, but the awareness of the whole body becomes more distinct, so that one is able to focus on the breath area, but at the same time, one gets the sense of the body as a totality in the act of breathing. There's a technical word for this in maybe neurology or physiology, proprioceptive. Has anybody come across that word before? Let's see if I could spell it correctly. I think that's correct. So that is the sense that we have of our body as an entity, existing in space. So we have this to some degree all of the time. Even though I'm standing here right now speaking, so I'm not just aware of speaking, but I have this kind of background experience or awareness of my body as a physical entity standing here. And so as one is attending to the in and out breath, then the way I see it is that the sense of the body in its totality sort of emerges and becomes more clearer and more distinct. Okay, then we come to the fourth phase of the first tetrad. This is, I shall breathe in, tranquilizing the bodily formation. He trains thus, I shall breathe out, tranquilizing the bodily formation. Now what's called the bodily formation here is kaya sankhara. The expression kaya sankhara is used in several senses in the suttas. Usually it's used to mean activities performed with the body, that is, volitional activities done with the body that create karma. But here it's used in a special sense to mean the in and out breathing. We find this definition of the bodily formation in Sutta number 44. This is on page 399. It's said here that in and out breathing are the bodily formation. Then the question is raised, why are in breathing and out breathing the bodily formation? Then the reason is given that in breathing and out breathing are bodily. They are states or dhammas bound up with the body. That's why in breathing and out breathing are the bodily formation. So that would be the meaning of bodily formation, which is relevant here. It's the in-breathing and out-breathing. And so one trains thus, I shall breathe in, tranquilizing the bodily formation. One trains thus, I shall breathe out, tranquilizing the bodily formation. And it's said by most teachers that one doesn't make a deliberate effort to tranquilize the breath, but just as one goes on, being mindful of the breath, focusing upon the in and out breath, it's just part of the natural process that increased awareness of the breath, or as one is increasingly aware of the breath, the mind becomes more subtle, more refined. And as the mind becomes more subtle and more refined, then the breathing becomes more subtle, more refined, or more tranquil. And something further to be noticed about the last two stages in this first tetrad and all of the other stages that come after this. In the first two stages, the Buddha speaks about the monk, he understands this, he understands that. But from the third stage on, he says, he trains thus. So in this case, it's not just something that one is aware of, but one has to make a deliberate effort to train oneself in these further stages. But most teachers that I've learned from or read or heard say, don't make a deliberate effort to breathe more slowly or more calmly, but just be aware of the breath. And as one is aware of the breath, that is the training. As one is aware of the breath, then the breath on its own will become subtler, more tranquil.